Searching for Hunter S. Thompson. The 2021 State of Gonzo address. Ron Whitehead will die August 20th was blood inscribed in large handwritten letters directly above my P.O. box at the 7th and York downtown Louisville post office. My box was full of mail, including a letter from Jim the Basketball Diaries Carroll, and a huge hand crayon colored art package filled with signed books from Allen Ginsberg. On that sizzling hot summer of 1995 Saturday morning, 32 police officers plus the postal inspector took photos and interviewed me. "Do you have any enemies?" the postal inspector asked. I laughed and asked, "Do you?" They eventually turned the case over to the FBI, who eventually, supposedly, lost my file. The Louisville Free Public Library, 4th and York, was having an extensive exhibit of my work. Walls were covered with published in heaven posters, glass cases filled with inscribed books and handwritten letters from Hunter S. Thompson, Seamus Heaney, John Updike, President Jimmy Carter, the Dalai Lama, all members of the Beat Generation, and many others. On the Monday morning after the death threat, I discovered that someone had defaced the Never Give Up poster of the poem I wrote with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, calling the Dalai Lama and me anti-American, telling us to get the hell out of America, plus select expletives. For several nights there were phone calls. Hello? 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 Click. No response. For nights and nights there were car doors slamming and tires squealing at 2 and 3 and 4 a.m. in front of my home. Then Memal died. Louverine Aglehart Render was Mama's mother, my grandmother, mother of 13. Mama was her oldest. After the funeral at the Centertown Baptist Church, I loaded my family into the rental car and we headed west for a 5,000-mile, 2-week road trip. I drove 24 hours non-stop, Kentucky to Illinois to Missouri to Kansas to Colorado. I took the back roads to Pikes Peak to Independence Pass to Aspen to Woody Creek to Owl Farm. Hunter S. Thompson had invited us for a visit. I published his He Was a Crook, the Nixon obituary as a limited edition published in Heaven poster. It was being sold by Waiting for Godot Books out of Hadley, Massachusetts, and it was getting big attention from collectors around the world. My kids knew about Hunter S. Thompson. My oldest son, Nathaniel, and my daughter, Ronnie, had met him in New York City a year earlier. They had been 2 of the 150 young people I caravanned in 10 rented passenger vans to attend and participate in the 48-hour non-stop music and poetry insomniacathon I produced to kick off New York University's week-long 50-year celebration of the Beat Generation. It was already dark by the time I passed through the vulture-protected gateway to Hunter's Owl Farm. I parked next to the Red Shark. Loud speakers all around the yard, cranked all the way up, suddenly blasted god-awful growls and screams of what sounded like a bear eating a baby. None of us batted an eye. Hunter welcomed us in. He offered me cocaine and marijuana and bourbon. In the kitchen, he opened 2 drawers to show me that one was filled with silver markers and the other with gold markers. He started signing 100 copies of He Was a Crook, the Nixon obituary. Halfway through the signing, one of the silver markers froze up. Nothing would come out. Suddenly, Hunter started screaming and cussing, slamming the marker and pounding his fist on the counter. Deborah Fuller, his longtime personal assistant, quickly stepped around to his back and, with gentle but firm hands on his shoulders and chest, started speaking soothingly to him, saying, "It's okay, Hunter. Everything is okay. Calm down now." In no time, he was fine. He selected another marker and started signing again. He asked me to read He Was a Crook to him. Deborah Fuller took photos. Hunter was sitting in what I called his throne chair, there in the kitchen, next to the phone. As I stood next to him for a photo, Hunter handed me his pistol, which was nestled near the phone. He said, "Here, hold this. It'll get us both into trouble one of these days." I put my right arm around his shoulder. He put his left arm around my waist. I held his gun in front of us in my left hand. Deborah took the photo. Then Jack Nicholson called. He had come out for the weekend to watch a televised boxing match with Hunter. Hunter, not knowing Jack had brought his daughter, slipped over to Jack's house, broke out a window, and threw several hundred lit firecrackers into the house, scared the hell out of Jack's girls. Jack was pissed. He cussed Hunter up one side and down the other, then hung up. We listened over Hunter's speakerphone. Hunter said, "Oh shit, I didn't know he brought his kids with him." By the time Jack called back, he and his daughters were calming down. He didn't call Hunter as many names. Hunter apologized. By the third call, everything was fine. All was forgiven. Hunter was a wild man, but he was also a Southern gentleman. It was hard to hold a grudge against him, but many people did and still do, including people from his home state, Kentucky, and his hometown, Louisville. After long talks, Hunter and I exchanged gifts, and I loaded my family up and I drove on through what remained of the night, all the way to 261 Columbus Avenue, North Beach, San Francisco, where we hooked up with Lawrence Ferlinghetti. The only ones for me are the mad ones, the ones who are mad to live, mad to talk, mad to be saved, desirous of everything at the same time, the ones who never yawn or say a commonplace thing, but burn, 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 like fabulous Roman candles exploding like spiders across the stars. And in the middle, you see the blue center light pop, and everybody goes, "Oh!" Jack Kerouac, outlaw writer. To live outside the law, you must be honest. Bob Dylan, outlaw poet. An outlaw can be defined as somebody who lives outside the law, beyond the law, not necessarily against it. By the time I wrote Hell's Angels, I was riding with him, and it was clear that it was no longer possible for me to go back and live within the law. There were a lot more outlaws than me. I was just a writer. I wasn't trying to be an outlaw writer. I never heard of the term. Somebody else made it up. But we were all outside the law. Kerouac, Miller, Burroughs, Ginsberg, Kesey, me. I didn't have a gauge as to who was the worst outlaw. I just recognized my allies, my people. Hunter S. Thompson, outlaw writer. Hunter and I had discussed many people we both knew. I told him my next stop was San Francisco and a visit with Lawrence Ferlinghetti. I told him about all the work I was doing with Lawrence. Hunter had the greatest respect for Ferlinghetti. He wrote a long note on He Was a Crook Nixon obituary poster and asked me to hand deliver it to Lawrence. I told him I would, and I did. In April 1993, I brought Lawrence Ferlinghetti and his son Lorenzo to Louisville for a week-long visit. Lawrence gave a standing room only reading at the University of Louisville where I was teaching. At his request, I took him to visit Thomas Merton's grave at the Abbey of Gethsemane. Brother Patrick Hart, Merton's secretary and editor of his journals, gave us the grand tour of the Abbey. On the hour-long drive back to Louisville, Lawrence told me about Merton spending the night with him in San Francisco, the last night of his life in the USA, before heading on to Asia, where he had 3 talks with the Dalai Lama, inspiring him to become more ecumenical in his worldview. After the 3rd talk, Merton died, supposedly an accidental death of electrocution. Ferlinghetti suggested I bring the Dalai Lama to Kentucky for a talk and to visit Merton's grave. A year later, in April 1994, the Dalai Lama came to Kentucky. I had the opportunity to ask him one question. It was a powerful, life-changing experience. That's when I wrote the Never Give Up poem with him. The poem is now all over the world. In May 1993, I spent a long weekend at Ferlinghetti's apartment on Francisco, Telegraph Hill, North Beach, San Francisco. On the return flight back to Kentucky, I wrote my Searching for Lawrence Ferlinghetti, San Francisco, May 1993 poem. After the death threat, I called Ferlinghetti and told him about our trip out west. He invited us to meet him at City Lights. So I drove nonstop from Owl Farm to City Lights. Lawrence took us to a fantastic Chinese restaurant down the hill for dinner. Then back at City Lights, he gave each of us $100 worth of books. I gave him the poster Hunter inscribed for him, plus he bought hundreds of copies of the limited edition He Was a Crook poster, plus hundreds of other Published in Heaven posters. He asked me to bring posters I published of work by Allen Ginsberg, Gregory Corso, Herbert Huncke, William S. Burroughs, Jack Kerouac, Neil Cassidy, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, Diane DePrima, Robert Hunter, and others. The next day, my family and I wandered all over North Beach, walked Golden Gate Bridge, then headed on to Yosemite, Sequoia National Forest, Painted Desert, the Grand Canyon, and other stops, then back to Louisville. Soon as we unpacked, before I drove nonstop to Cambridge, Massachusetts to meet the Dalai Lama for the second time, I went to visit Hunter's mom, Virginia. Hunter asked me to start visiting her and keep an eye on her because more and more filthy bastards were bothering her, claiming to be friends of his, trying to get inside information for unapproved biographies. That was the beginning of my friendship with Virginia Thompson, a remarkable lady, retired librarian who loved her bourbon. She called often and invited me to visit, and at the end of each call, she always said, "Oh, Ron, please bring me some bourbon. You'll have to sneak it in. They won't let me have it in here." So I did, and the first thing she said when I arrived was, "I promised to not talk about Hunter today." But after her second glass of bourbon, Hunter was her main topic of conversation for the next few hours and the rest of the bourbon. Virginia was a delightful person. I thoroughly enjoyed our visits, and I sure saw Hunter in her. I learned more about Hunter from Virginia than I ever learned from any other source. Dr. Hunter S. Thompson is dead. I followed his life and work from the release of Hell's Angels until now, here in Louisville at the High Horse Bar, roughest and toughest place in town. Hunter shot himself February 20, 2005, in the kitchen at Owl Farm. Did he use the gun he handed me, saying, "Here, hold this. It'll get us both into trouble one of these days"? Probably. He is gone. In the kitchen, I drank and did drugs with him and watched basketball. One night, years ago, in early May, my son Nathaniel and I arrived, driving 24 hours nonstop from Louisville, Kentucky to Owl Farm, just in time to watch the NBA playoffs with Hunter. I had published 2 more posters by Hunter, and I was there to give him copies, plus get him to sign some. Don Johnson called several times wanting us to come over and watch the game. Kentuckian Rex Chapman was playing for the Phoenix Suns. The Suns were down by 9 points with 1 minute to go in the game. I looked at Hunter and said, "I'll bet you that Rex will hit 3 threes and tie the game, that the Suns will win by 1 point in 3 overtimes." Hunter looked at me and laughed. Rex hit 3 threes and tied the game, but Phoenix lost in 3 overtimes by 1 point. I got damn close. Hunter paid even closer attention to me after that. We talked about life, about our families, about literature. Hunter was a good, kind man. He was full of life. He was tough. He was a real human being. He was Spirit, Holy Spirit, no matter what anyone says. I had the honor of producing, with the help of an army of young people, the official Hunter S. Thompson tribute at Memorial Auditorium on 4th Street in Louisville, Kentucky, Hunter's hometown, December 12, 1996. That was 25 years ago. It was the 25th anniversary of the publication of Hunter's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. At the tribute, we had a sold-out standing room only audience of over 2,000. I brought in Hunter, Hunter's mom, Virginia, his son, Juan, Hunter's bodyguard, Sheriff of Pitkin County, Bob Broadus, Johnny Depp, Warren Zevon, David Amram, Douglas Brinkley, Roxanne Pulitzer, and many more. They were all in Louisville for a week. I put them up at the Brown Hotel. I hired 7 Lincoln Continentals and 2 limousines. The mayor gave Hunter the keys to the city. The governor named Hunter, Johnny, Warren, David, Doug, and me Kentucky colonels. It was a spectacular 4-hour event. Hunter stands shoulder to shoulder with Mark Twain, John Steinbeck, Jack Kerouac, William S. Burroughs, with America's best prose writers. People continue to say that there will be no audience for Thompson's work, that no one will understand or care. Yet, as I travel across the USA and around the world working with young people, I witness a movement away from the constraints of non-democratic, Puritan, totalitarian cultures. I see a new generation that recognizes the lies of the power elite, a generation that is turning to the free thinkers, the freedom fighters of the 50s and 60s, recognizing and honoring them as mentors. Art is a kind of innate drive that seizes a human being and makes her or him its instrument. The artist is not simply a person acting freely in pursuit of a merely private end, but one who allows art to realize its purposes through her or his person. Artists have moods, free will, personal aims, but as artists, they are bearers of a collective humanity, carrying and shaping the common, unconscious life of the species. We must look beyond the life of the artist to the work, the body of work itself. That is the measure of success. Like those who have re-examined George Orwell's 1984 to find a multi-layered literary masterpiece, we must look deep into Thompson's works and discover the many layered messages. His books, especially the early ones, and his letters are literary masterpieces equal to the best writing ever produced. I often hear a Hunter fan say, wouldn't Hunter sneer at Gonzo Fest and all the honoring you're doing of his life and work? Wouldn't he see it as selling out? I always respond with, hell no. Hunter knew he was a hell of a writer, one of the best. He knew he deserved the recognition. He always talked about and watched film footage from the official tribute I produced in 1996. He was proud and thankful to be honored in his home state of Kentucky and his hometown of Louisville. He had a rough-ass time growing up. Being a genius, juvenile delinquent got him into trouble more than once. He was finally run out of town just before his high school graduation. He loved Louisville and Kentucky, but because of the way he was treated by the old ruling gentry, he despised many aspects of the culture, as do I. Hunter S. Thompson's work is the terrible saga of the ending of time for the American dream, with his actions set at the heart of American materialist culture, with violence, the Hells Angels, and war, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, as perpetual background. Hunter S. Thompson, like the prophets of old, shows how we, through greed and power lust, have already gone over the edge. As Jack Kerouac, through his brilliant oeuvre, breathed hope into international youth culture, starting with his 1957 epic On the Road, Thompson shows how the ruling power elite are not about to share what they control with idealists yearning for a world of free creative expression, of equality, peace, love, tolerance, understanding. Hunter still has the power to disturb those who cling to the past. Hunter still unnerves the ruling elite. Those folks intentionally focus on the drugs, the booze, and the crazy man antics, the weird turned pro, the wild man persona he created, and they do all they can to dismiss Hunter's writing by dismissing his lifestyle. Honoring Hunter S. Thompson's life and body of work is long overdue. After Hunter shot himself, I wrote Hunter Shaman Thompson is Dead, a tribute, and 14 suggestions for Louisville to honor Hunter S. Thompson. I produced a memorial in Louisville at the Rudyard Kipling, but Louisville remained quiet, still embarrassed, utterly mortified to its gentrified roots by the life of one of its finest writers. Truly, I tell you, said Jesus, no prophet is accepted in his hometown. Luke 4:24. Can I get an amen? While papers around the country and the world published long articles of appreciation and praise of Hunter's writing career, the Courier-Journal, Louisville and Kentucky's leading newspaper, managed a cartoon mocking Hunter and a small piece by columnist Bob Hill. I've heard more than once that Hunter S. Thompson is a madman, that, oh, look at what he could have done if he lived a more sane life. Nobel Prize winner Elie Wiesel in The Town Beyond the Wall says, Mad Moishe, the fat man who cries when he sings and laughs when he is silent. Moishe, I speak of the real Moishe, the one who hides behind the madman is a great man. He is far-seeing. He sees worlds that remain inaccessible to us. His madness is only a wall erected to protect us. To see what Moishe's bloodshot eyes see would be dangerous. In Jewish mysticism, the prophet often bears the facade of madness. Hunter S. Thompson stands in direct lineage to the great writers and prophets, and as with the prophets of old, the message may be too painful for the masses to tolerate, to hear, to bear. They may, and usually do, condemn, even kill the messenger. Hunter stood as long as he could. He fought a valiant fight. He was a brave yet sensitive soul. He was a sacred warrior. He saw with the eyes of a poet. Henrik Ibsen said to be a poet, most of all to see. Hunter saw, he felt, he recorded his visions. He took alcohol and drugs to ease the pain generated by what he saw, what he felt. He lived on his own terms. He died on his own terms. Did the masses kill Hunter? Did he kill himself? He found the courage to stand up against the power mongers and the masses. At least 13 times he should have died, but miraculously didn't. He chose to take his own life. He completed the work he came to do. Knowledge, from the inception of modernism and through postmodernism and chaos to the ocean of consciousness, is reorganized, redefined through poetry, literature, art, music, and film. The genres are changing. The canons are exploding, as is culture. The mythopoetic artists the mythopoetic artistic creations of cutting-edge artists are life-changing forms of a culture, a civilization, a world in which humanity lives not securely in cities, nor innocently in the country, but on the apocalyptic simultaneous edge of a new realm of being and understanding. The mythopoet, female and or male, returns to the role of prophet seer by creating myths that resonate in the minds of readers, myths that speak with the authority of the ancient myths, myths that are gifts from the shadow realms of the creative imagination. Since 2010, my friend Denny Humphrey and I, along with a handful of amazing production team members, have produced an annual Gonzo Fest, a celebration of the life and work of Louisville native son Hunter S. Thompson. In 2013, the mayor and the city of Louisville joined in to support our efforts. In 2014, Ralph Steadman sent me numerous Hunter portraits. The Gonzo Fest production team unanimously selected one to go on the giant Hunter banner, which was placed on the side of the Bristol Bar and Grill on Bardstown Road in the heart of the Highlands, Hunter's old stomping ground. I asked Stedman to paint the words Hunter's Gonzoville, which we also added to the enormous banner. 22,000 vehicles pass the Hunter's Gonzoville portrait banner every day. I asked Louisville Mayor Greg Fisher to permanently change the name of Louisville to Hunter's Gonzoville. At the 2014 Gonzo Fest, he issued and read a proclamation changing the name of Louisville to Hunter's Gonzoville for the week of Gonzo Fest. It was a big victory. I told Hunter about it. He said, "It's about damn time." The 10th anniversary Gonzo Fest will take place September the 11th, right here at the High Horse Bar, the roughest and toughest place in town. We'll have music and spoken word on large outdoor and indoor stages featuring music by the Jesse Lees, the Ass Haulers, Blind Feline, High Helens, Mythigold, the Storm Generation Band, and spoken word by Hannah Drake, Frank Messina, P.W. Covington, Rhonda Mathis, Frog Corpse, Hilton Errol, and yours truly. Gonzo Fest draws thousands of Hunter Gonzo fans from around the world. Whether you know Hunter as a madman or a visionary, whether you see him as a drunk devil knocking in vain on the gates of heaven or a brilliant native son of the bluegrass, I invite each and every one of you to the biggest, bestest celebration of Hunter S. Thompson's life and work and the Gonzo spirit in the whole wide world. I invite all of you to join forces with us here in Hunter's Gonzoville at the High Horse Bar on Saturday, September the 11th. And remember, the edge, there is no honest way to explain it, because the only people who really know where it is are the ones who have gone over. Happy 50th anniversary of the release of Hunter's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Happy 10th anniversary Gonzo Fest Louisville. Thank you. See you all at Gonzo Fest. Yes, come on.